Good afternoon to everyone joining us. We're just going to give it a second or two to let some participants join on in. Okay, so let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ariana Miller. I am the event planner here at the HIA-LI. I want to thank you for joining us at our 32nd annual trade show. We're very happy to have you. I want to welcome you to the Radio Podcast Business Branding Seminar. We have a great panel lined up for you. They have a lot of great discussion topics that I think everyone's going to find very useful. If you have any questions throughout, please add them to the Q&A portion on the bottom. Your questions will be answered by our panel. So I want to introduce our moderator, Brian Cohen, and Brian Cohen is the co-founder of the Long Island Speakers Bureau. So without further ado, Brian.
Thank you very much, Ariana. Thank you very much to the AA for hosting this and putting this whole trade show together. Very excited. 32nd annual trade show, first ever going virtual. Wow, it's different, it's new, it's a learning curve, it's fantastic. It also means that a lot of us are operating outside of that comfort zone. Sounds like somebody who might be interested in doing a podcast radio show? Well, that's also operating outside of the comfort zone. You need to get comfortable doing that and figure out a way for you to do that. One way to do that, the first step is to gain a little bit of knowledge. And the knowledge that you really need is not what size microphone to use, what kind of system should I use, do I go to a studio? Do I do it at home or do anything like that? The biggest question in the world is, why are you doing it in the first place? This was yesterday's conversation. Gentleman came over to me, we were chatting, and he told me they wanted to do a podcast. I was like, why are you doing it? Well, to gain more visibility, meet more people. I say, yeah, okay, that's all good, but why? And who are you when you're hosting that podcast? Are you the expert sharing information, or are you an interviewer pulling information out from other people? And you do a podcast show, you do a radio show. Do you do visual or you just do audio? There's a lot of questions in there, but a lot of those questions can be answered by the why. Why are you doing it in the first place? And today's panel is a wide variety of people. They host radio shows, podcasts themselves. They also create podcasts for other people, very involved in the marketing side of things, either hosting a show for their own benefit from a business standpoint, from your business standpoint, or from a business building standpoint. So I do hope that what you gain from this is a better understanding of why you really need to look at why you're doing it in the first place, what you're looking to accomplish, and then figure out which one of these fine panelists you want to speak to in order to gain some further insight as to how to truly make it happen. Our panelists today, we'll go around rather quickly with that, and then we're going to ask each of our panelists to say why it is that you focus on this area of the podcast, the marketing area, etc. So Kevin Wood is an independent media producer covering all aspects of professional cinematography, photography, vodcasts, live streams, and event producing. He's also a social media expert and producer. You'll hear that one quite a few times. Hillary Topper, HJMT Media, houses 2 blogs. Did throw that one into the equation there too, but a blog. A triathletesdiary.com, New York Lifestyle blog.com, and the podcast Hillary Topper on Air. In addition to that, she is a blogger and a podcaster. She also coaches running with Team Galloway, Long Island, and has a triathlon team. So if you're going to call Hillary, then you got to be ready to do these triathlons too. You get to talk that talk. And then also Arthur Germain. Arthur Germain happens to be one of the company that co-founded, the other co-founder of the Long Island Speakers Bureau. He founded Communication Strategy Group, which is a brand storytelling agency in 2005. His idea was to create a small, intimate agency that combined boutique firm responsiveness and brand storytelling expertise. And he's been recognized for that too. It's a great job for Arthur and his team at Communication Strategy Group. And then there's Mr. Darren Siaffi. Darren Siaffi started out in the world of being an accountant, then went into coaching, then started doing the podcast and the radio shows. So his background is more of the business side coming out, but he, in a unique format to here, he hosts a radio show and also a podcast with two different ideas behind it and trying to achieve two different factors there. So let's go around the room. Hillary, would you like to start? What is it that pushed you into that direction of marketing?
So in 2011, actually right after I wrote my first book on social media management. I started my podcast as a way to help small business owners grow both personally and professionally. And so I've been doing that for a while and just loving it. Yeah. And recently I just wrote this book. I'm going to give myself a little plug here, Branding in a Digital World. And if anybody is interested at the end of this, shoot me an email and I will send you a free copy.
Right. And the link to all of that. So that everybody's contact information will be in the chat feature over here too. And if you do have any questions, by all means, ask them. We'll look to answer those questions as they come through. Mr. Jermaine, you also have a history before marketing, we'll say, or maybe it's always been marketing inside of you. You just decided to turn it in a different direction. So communication strategy, what was the story behind starting that company?
Yeah. So we started Communication Strategy Group. Now, 15 years ago, we just celebrated our 15th anniversary. What we wanted to do is help companies to share their stories in a better way. And a lot of the focus over 15 years started out around public relations, then social media and content marketing. And very often somebody has that kind of story that they need to share, they have difficulty sharing it. So that's why we built the agency. That's what we've done. And I'm really excited to be on this panel with everyone because one of the really great, exciting ways to tell your story is through a podcast. Hillary, I think, has a great story and she can tell about herself. She can literally run rings around everybody here. There's, so everyone's got that kind of story. So what we try to do is help companies say, people talk about their thought leadership. We call it your story leadership, a way to share that story through a podcast because it's kind of a fun and easy way to do it. And it's a very intimate environment because, you're whispering into somebody's ear while they're there in an audio only podcast. So I'll let somebody else go, but I'm really excited to be on the panel today.
Excellent. We'll get back to you on that one too, because it's really important that telling stories is basically, if you want to talk a common thread over here, it is telling stories. The question is who, somebody else's or yours. Kevin, you're in the telling somebody else's story category. What moved you in that direction?
I came full circle, talk about Hillary and I go back many, many years, more than I care to admit right now, right? 30 years I was in paper for 20 years, publishing. So big deal, right? It was thousands and hundreds of thousands of copies of many magazines I published. And here I am going back now and just changing the way that information is being disseminated. That's all we're really talking about here. And of course, with the proliferation of not only the internet, but social media, it's easier than ever. So for me, it's just full circle. Yes, I do try.
Okay, did I freeze?
No, I think me, you, and Arthur are good. I think Brian and Kevin froze.
Yeah, I saw a couple of people freeze.
Yes.
Why don't you pick up and tell us a little bit about yourself, Darren?
Okay, so I'll jump in here. I know we lost Kevin there because he froze.
Am I back?
Brian, you're back, Kevin.
You're
Okay.
back.
I don't know where I lost you, but that's the first time that ever happened, actually.
Okay.
So just to finish off, I don't know where I lost you, but we just recently finished setting up a studio that allow people to come in and tell their stories, even though we're quite honestly doing the opposite of that right now in this Zoom-like world.
Bringing that up, it's another factor too. In how are you going to do a podcast or a radio show? So,
right.
And Darren will scoot over there. Let's just stay with that first question, and then we'll go right back to that. In studio or out of studio is the how to do it, but why would you do that? Why would you do that? So, Darren, you've done both sides of this thing. But first, you went from an accountant, and I'll say it, backwards looking, right? Because it's like, show me your return, show me all your tax stuff, we'll put it together. Then you went into the coaching side of it. Now you're in radio. So As I've been saying,
Well-
forward looking.
Well, I never really left the accounting piece of it. We still, CBMS Consulting is my mainstay of revenue. And we're just a progressive accounting firm where we're forward looking. We're not back looking. Most accounting firms are, give me your information. I'll tell you what happened. We're not only telling you what happened, we're predicting what's going to happen. That's a big part of what we do. Getting into the whole podcasting thing was like Hillary did. I wrote a book a few years ago, and the book was really created so people could see that there's an expertise here that is not typical of your normal accountant. And I went on a couple of podcasts, and I ended up being with the Music Man, who I do a podcast with now. And it was more done so, hey, you know what? I could show people who they are and what they're all about. In my coaching, I teach that people don't do business with you necessarily because of what you do. They do business because they like you, right? And they want to work with you. That's a big closing factor with everybody. And that's what sometimes salespeople don't get. Salespeople are into that close, not necessarily creating that relationship where people say, hey, you know what? I like this guy. I want to do business with them. Because every major thing that you do in your life, or everything that you do in life, you do it because, you know what? I want to do it with that person, not because you felt like you're forced to do it. And that's how I got into this. Was I wanted to, show people that, hey, you know what? I have an expertise. But the show that I do with Norm is not necessarily highlighting my expertise. It's actually interviewing other people with expertise, and bringing that out, and actually bringing that out to, my clients, and as well as the rest of the world. Whereas my radio show, I have a radio show on Long Island News, LI News Radio on Monday afternoons. That's different. That highlights my expertise and my guests. It's all about bringing that expert information to business owners out, specific information. So, I'm sitting on both, like you mentioned before, Brian, I'm sitting on both sides of the fence here. And, when it comes to podcasting and doing radio.
Yeah. So do you prepare differently for the shows?
Yes.
So if it's your,
It's a very different preparation for the Business Power Hour, which we do on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. And we're broadcasting on Facebook, but you also can get it on iTunes and Google Podcasts and iHeartRadio and all that other stuff, as well as my radio show, the Darren Sayafi Show. The preparation for the Business Power Hour is all about the guest. I'm prepping, learning what the guest is all about, what their expertise is, and then I'm finding questions that would pertain to the audience, because we all answer questions as experts that we think people want to hear, but I take it from the perspective of, I don't know anything about your business, so I'm going to ask the questions like I'm going to be one of your customers or clients or whatever it may be. And preparation for my show, the Darren Sayafi Show, it's more of, okay, here's kind of like what we're going to teach this week. This is an issue that business owners have. We're going to talk about the issue and the process you go through in fixing it and taking the steps to fix it.
right.
And that's, so it's more of a teaching, it's coming up with a lesson plan.
Right. And therein lies the difference between the two. Whether if you have your own podcast or radio show, are you an interviewer? That's the Business Power Hour. Darren is an interviewer. It's not about him. It's not about Norm. It's about the guest, totally about the guest. So all that collection of information in front of it is. The other side of it is the radio show. Now, all of a sudden, you are the expert. You're the one that is sharing your knowledge going out. So Hillary, if you're working with somebody, and you work with a wide variety of clients, right? And it's in the marketing, it's the branding, it's a collection of everything. And the idea of them asking, should I do a podcast? Should I do a podcast? Should I do a radio show? Should I be a guest on one of these things? Where do you begin that conversation?
I think that people need to realize that being a podcaster is a lot of work. It is a lot of work. It is not, it's fun and it's great and it's glamorous and all, But to be honest with you, if you don't have the time to put into it, just like a blog, if you don't have the time to put into it, you're better off being a guest blogger or a guest on a podcast. And then you can tap into other people's audiences, you know, to expand your reach.
Right. Well, Kevin, you have people on too. And then when you're doing the intro to them, that intro is like so unbelievably important. As I read over here, right? I'm reading your intros. So I get a chance to brag about you that you necessarily wouldn't be bragging about you. Let's have someone do a voiceover in the front of it. So Kevin, when you have somebody considering to be a guest on your show, is there a process that you go through?
I really try to let things emanate very naturally. And I realize that's just probably baked into my personality, that I'm comfortable letting things blossom naturally. Some people wouldn't be able to live with that. So while I will act, you know, I have to be able to pronounce your name right. You know what I mean? That's important. And just that you're in accounting and you're not cutting grass somewhere. Those basic things you got to know, but I do let it blossom. And I have to tell you, one of the things that is hard for a person that we're all social here, right? That's automatic. That if we're in this game or if we're in this industry, we're social people. And if we weren't here in the Zoom thing, we'd be, you know, somewhere in Melville or Jules socializing, right? We know that. So one of the things I learned early on is to just actually listen and let things, and that's not as easy as it sounds, is when somebody's getting into something and you're interviewing, your automatic thing is, yeah, right. And, oh yeah, I learned not to do that. And it's really worked well. I'm not conscious of it anymore. And because of that, there might be a split second of uncomfortable, but you come out of it better. You come out of it with, as we've been talking about, that guest telling their own story. So I get very basic facts and I really let it emanate naturally. And of course, not drone on for 2 hours as well.
I get you on that one. You know, it's funny you mentioned that. So if we weren't doing this, we have our Toastmaster was able to organize a booth for Toastmasters. So we've been doing live video from 9 a.m. until midnight, both days. We've got guests coming through all the way. So yeah. You know, I needed to get out and speak to people, and this was one way of doing it, inclusive of doing the Facebook Live. But it is interesting, the preparation time and how different people approach it. One of the conversations I had about, you know, did you work out questions with the panel today and get the whole thing set up? No, I knew how to pronounce your names. That was good. And the direction that you wanted to take this in, and the direction I wanted to take it in, but how we got there, we'll get there. You know, that side of it is fine, but you know, look, you get
the best laid plans. You know that saying, the best laid plans, and I find out that it's naturally flowing like a river anyway.
Yeah,
I find that on both the radio show, because I have guests on, and that I just have a basic framework of where I want to go with it, and like you said, Kevin, just let it flow. Don't try to be, you know, letter perfect scripted when you're doing stuff. Because it's not real. People will pick up on that. I mean, that's the one thing that I learned is, you know, don't try to be so scripted, because then you sound like a robot. Yeah. You know, I had a guest come on my radio show and he's like, this is the script I want to go with. Ugh. And he sent it over to me and I looked at it and went, okay. I said, I'll ask you these questions, you know, or a variation of them. And he went, what do you mean a variation of them? I said, I'm going to ask you the questions. I'm going to take these questions, but I'm going to ask you the questions that make sense for the audience. Right. And he's like, but this is what I want to talk about. I said, yeah, but is it what the audience really wants to hear? Because that's a very important point. You got to know what your audience wants to hear. Otherwise, you're not going to have them.
I like to change it up a little bit. Like I've got questions that I ask my guests, but then the other day I just did a really good one with Tim HIA-LI of the Profit Express, who has a great podcast. So I'm going to give him a pitch because I think he's awesome. Anyway, so I just interviewed him on my show and we did this lightning round just to find out about him, you know, to find out about his kids and this, you know, whatever. I mean, it was a lot of fun to do it and it was really quick. Yeah. So we had a really good time, and that'll be airing soon as well.
Right. So you have to have faith in your guests. So let's flip this around on the other side, right? Because our audience now is, I might want to host a radio show, a podcast, or just be a guest. So the guest really needs to prepare in advance. Now, also the podcast service that you offer, it's not about you at all. It's
Right.
all about the guest, and it's not scripted, but you're certainly planning it out a bit more. So what are you looking for from that person? Is, I want to do the podcast, and we go that route on your side of it.
Yeah, so
It's different. It's a
kind of
different
ties
approach.
together what everyone's saying though. So we started out, we're working with clients, as Hillary has done, working with clients who are developing a blog and writing it and working on that. And sometimes you get, Hillary, tell me if this sounds familiar. They tell you, I'm too busy, right? You want to interview them, they were busy. And the reality might have been that they were a little bit busy. But a focused podcast where they could talk for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, allowed them to have a conversation or have a conversation with somebody else in their organization, and it made them much more comfortable. So we've helped to kind of develop hosts. And to Kevin's point, we try not to script it. We try to give them, here's an intro, and here's going to be the topic, and here's some of the questions. But don't anticipate the question, with a response from your guest who's talking with you. Take it where it goes. If they say, if they're going through and question 3 somewhere in there, they say, I really think the most important thing is what we just talked about. Don't move to question 4. Dive in there and ask them, what do you mean the really most important thing? Go there. And I, my clients have had a lot of fun with that. So we actually just launched a service just for this. We call it brand story casting, playing with our whole brand telling theme. And brand story casting is focused to let you build your own podcast. Because I think like Hillary said, there are 3 ways to podcast. I mean, there's a million ways, but I see there are 3. Be a guest on somebody else's podcast. That's the easiest. Do that. The next one is to do your own podcast. And then you do need to know, what's the editing software I'm going to use and the microphone I'm going to use and how do I push it out there? And then the third is have somebody do it for you. And that's what we did. Is we had started doing it for clients anyway. So we said, why don't we launch this out as a service? And that's the done for you model. But in all 3 of those models, everything everyone else has said is true. Sometimes you're the host. Sometimes you're the guest. Sometimes it's a little scripted and sometimes it's free, it's a free form, but generally it's around a topic. For us, it's around a B2B topic, or, my clients, it's around a B2B topic that they care about, that they want to share. It's got to be educational and informational. Nobody wants to hear it if it's just, if it's just a sales item, if it's really salesy. To use what Darren said, you're not there to close, you're there to get close. And that's what, that's, I think, what we try to do with the podcast. And we're doing audio only at the moment. So a lot of you have a different experience when you're doing video. But we did the audio only because it just was easier for clients, especially now under COVID, who were suddenly sent home, didn't have a lot of equipment, but we could send them a microphone and they could send their guest a microphone or a headset, and suddenly they could podcast. So that's been a really great way to do it. And at some point we may do video only if we can, video as well, if we could do that. But right now the audio only has worked out really, really well for us.
So that person that you want to, and the question is, I want to do a podcast. I have a business, whatever it might be. Am I doing it for the branding side of it, or am I doing it for the business building side of it? A little bit more on the sales side. So Arthur, just staying right here with that podcast, is that more on the I'm an expert going out, or you can do the interview too? And what kind of company would be, if I'm the president of a company, do I want to go out and a president of like a manufacturing company? Do I want to be an interviewer? Does that make any sense to my brand?
It might, if, it depends on what you want to do. I think, we're always encouraging clients that you want to share your story, but your story might be the value that you're providing to your customers. So I think what Darren does is a perfect example, right? If your story is, I help my clients do a forward look at their accounting so that they can better prepare and grow and build their company, then I want to talk to and interview the customers about the benefit that they've received, and maybe some certain thing we did. So maybe Darren helped somebody with an EIDL loan or a PPP loan. Let's talk about that. What was the experience? How did you use that? When does it have to be repaid? He's going to be the interviewer and drive through that. But he's telling his expertise. He's sharing his expertise that way. But that interview is with the customer. You could do an interview with the customer and highlight how your service helped them, make them the hero, and then they want to share that same podcast on their own website or in social media. So that's really the goal. That's the full circle goal. We always say that you want your brand story to be remembered, repeated, and rewarded. And the rewarding part is that it's getting reshared through because you've done a good job. People say win-win, but the reality is that did you connect so that you can share it. That's what you really want to do. And I think the podcast is a great way to do that.
Right. And that's still, even if Darren's highlighting interviewing somebody and highlighting their success with something, you get a few moments in there to chime in a little bit. And obviously there's a tie-in between you and that person, otherwise it wouldn't be on the program with you. So you are still sharing your expertise. Hey, Hillary, let's take this in a little different direction. So Arthur and
Brian, before we do that, I just want to expound a little bit on what Arthur just said. And he said something very important. It's the resharing that's the important part, because sometimes you don't get eyes on or ears on when you first broadcast it. It's having it out there and resharing it and sharing it through multiple channels that, it's like anything. The more people hear your name, the more people hear your voice, the more people, see you and hear you in different contexts, the more they're going to go, wait a second, I know this guy. I like this guy. You think about perfect examples, Howard Stern, right? You got people who hate him or they love him. But the more people listen to him, the more they like him, and they think differently of him than what's the image, or vice versa. The more they listen to it. But it's all you have to do now out there is say Howard Stern. Everybody knows, because it's something that's constantly repeated. And it's very important to get your podcast in a circle where it's on like Google Podcasts and iTunes and all of those things, so you can have. My radio show, I just published it 2 weeks ago. I got people in Australia and New Zealand listening to it. Right. So it gives you a different reach than staying within, just the confines of Long Island.
Right. Oh, absolutely. So,
and talking about reach,
soon
there's a device whose name I can't say sitting behind me, because she'll suddenly pipe up and want to be part of the conversation. But if I ask her to play Darren's podcast, she will.
Yep.
And that's just another way to make it available, so I can listen while I'm working here.
And she should, and you should too. You listen to all of their products. I just probably maybe that's the most important takeaway from this whole thing is, if you're thinking about doing it, go listen to somebody else's. See what it is they're doing. See how Kevin lets somebody else be the total star of the show. It's not about Kevin. He's just the facilitator and conduit to brilliance. And same with Arthur, Darren, and Hillary in certain aspects of it. But Hillary, the brilliance. Sometimes you highlight your own brilliance, or maybe it's craziness. So, how much we're doing this, we're doing the podcast, whichever it is. Some of it has to do with that likability factor, as Darren had mentioned. It's part of it. You get to know somebody. We want to do business with people that we know, like, and trust before anything else. So we share who we are. You have taken that share who we are on trips, on testing out new products, on everyday blog, even your blog. What is it, the blog? It's lifestyle blog. I thought you were in marketing. What are we doing with a lifestyle blog?
So what I did was I kind of took my business into two different segments, right? I've got my PR business on one piece of it, and then I've got my media company on the other side. So my New York lifestyle blog just is about everything, life, travel, everything. I just watched The Social Dilemma and had a review of that, just everything. My A Triathlete's Diary is all about my triathlon journey, my swimming. I mean, look, I was never an athlete. I failed gym, so So just a couple of years ago, I decided I want to get into shape. I want to start doing triathlons. I didn't even know how to ride a bike or swim. I had to learn all that. So that's what that blog is about. And then the Hillary Topper on Air is I use actually both my lifestyle plus my triathlon journey in that. And, it really just helps business owners, to grow both personally and professionally. So if they want to do a triathlon, they'll learn about it. If they want to, travel to Japan, they will, so it's like that. And that's how I kind of structure it. And I kind of structure it as two separate businesses.
Yeah. And Arthur, I know what's floating around in your head right now too. I said, wait a second. If it's a lifestyle blog and it's a triathlete blog, and plus the regular marketing side of it, that puts her in front of quite a few different audiences.
Yeah.
Does it not, right? So let's with the branding side of that.
And
Is she
Hillary
losing anything?
Well, Hillary
By doing any
knows
of that?
her brand and who her audience is, and that's important. And she's got to build the credibility and literally walk the walk, right? So when Hillary talks about a product, like I saw like a pain relief product, Hillary can talk about, because I took a tumble during a marathon, and this is a product. So there's trust built up there. It's the same with a B2B audience. If I'm going to talk about branding, somebody better see that I'm doing that, and that I'm working around a brand. That's not just something I popped up and I started to talk about on a podcast. There are plenty of those, by the way, but you want to look at and build an audience, and then an audience kind of gravitates to those podcasts that they enjoy as well.
Right. And there is entertainment in everything that we do, regardless of what it is. And that makes it interesting and fun, something like that to watch, and a couple of interesting things that Hillary's done. Go ahead, and then Kevin.
And just as like a podcaster or a blogger, we become influencers, right? So brands start to hire us to promote their products. And that's what happens sometimes with me on Instagram. So you'll see me holding up a product. I'm getting hired and I'm disclosing that from this company. So, so there's that as well. Right. So it can lead to other things.
Right. Which is all, as long as it's in line, right? As long as it's in line with your personality, or I should say, since we're talking business, in line with your brand that you're doing it. And that is what you do. Product placement used to be huge, back in the day. And you know what? It's back again. Well, all over the place. And look at product placement. It's all around everything like that. All right, Kevin, man, I was going your way. You know that. Go ahead.
I felt it.
I'll ask you a question later.
I don't know where the digital raise the hand is. It's probably on the attendee side. I think something that the audience that's watching is probably asking themselves if they want to start or they're doing a podcast in the future is length. Everybody always asks length, and then the first thing you hear is that today's audience has lost their attention. But then how do you explain Joe Rogan having 5 million views at 2-3 hours at a clip, which means that if you go deeper, you need length. You understand that if you're an expert at something, that's okay to go longer because people are wanting to hear that. At the same time, I liken this to like, if you make a great dinner, right? A really great dinner, you eat that dinner in like 15 minutes and it took you 3 hours to cook it, right? Sometimes I take that approach where I do 2 or 3 hours and then I pluck the best of the best to replay. I think that's an important thing to understand because everybody thinks, okay, wow, I got to publish this whole 2-hour thing. What do I cut? What do I don't cut? My approach is I do publish the whole thing. Most of what I do is publishable, thankfully, but it might not be something that keeps everybody's attention. I get that. Let's face it. We all have 24 hours. You're sleeping. You really have, in my case, 16 hours or less. We don't have the capacity to take in the kind of content that's around today. And I would tell you that each one of us can't think we're that important. I mean, I love the Jimmy Fallon show. I don't watch it but once a month, maybe once every 2 months. That didn't used to be the case. There's no time to take in the amount of content that we are all producing and ingesting. It's absolutely impossible. So my point here at the end here is produce a 1-hour show and take the best 5 minutes of that and put it out and reshare it. And by the way, I want to say the reshare, I can't say enough. When I say to myself, I did something good, it's not views And it's not likes, it's reshares.
Yeah.
Arthur?
Yeah, I was just going to say to Kevin's point, which he's made very well. The reason that I enjoy the audio podcasting is that it hits these three markers for me. It's time shifted, meaning your audience can listen to it whenever they want. So if you've got a 16-hour day, or maybe in that 17th hour, you might be able to listen to the podcast. It's time shifted. It's geo shifted. You can listen to it wherever you are. It doesn't matter Hillary, you said you've got new audience in Australia, or Darren, new audience in Australia. There, it's geo shifted, and it's also activity shifted, because you can listen to it while you're jogging. You can listen to it while you're working out. You can listen to the podcast while you're driving. They don't like you watching the video podcast while you're driving. So, last night gave me a fourth item that nobody can see the fly on your head, but we'll leave that one there.
Yeah,
So,
that's true. That's true.
but it's the reason that we like it, because it's time shifted, activity shifted, geo shifted, that it makes it a very flexible thing. Because Kevin's right, people don't have a lot of time, or when they do have that time, you better provide them content in a way they can consume it. And so that's really what I like about the audio podcast. Not to denigrate the video podcasts, I think they're great too. I'm just saying this one you can kind of take with you when off the desktop.
Right. Well, the video side of it too. It's just it's much more personable.
Does anybody subscribe to Audible? Everybody subscribe to Audible?
I do.
You can speed that up and listen to books at 150%. That's where we're at now, where we're consuming, and it's almost impossible because you can't possibly take it in. It's impossible.
It's funny that you say that, Kevin, because my son, who is in his 20s, everything he watches is in speed. I've never seen anything like that. So it's very interesting.
Yeah.
I guess the Elvin Wood speed reading class has got to be updated too. It's speed listening class. But then you wind up, but on that note, so now all of a sudden your audience is doing their own editing, not you, because they'll slow it down on stuff that's a little bit more important to them. But isn't that somewhat the benefit, and maybe Darren, you could chime in on this one too, but isn't that some of the benefit of doing a podcast versus a radio show? So the radio show is broadcast through the airwaves over a certain geographical area. A podcast is just out there for anybody, any place, as Arthur so eloquently put it. It doesn't matter where you're at. But also the audience that it pertains to. And I know Darren translates this stuff to a podcast too. So, but just in the truest sense of the word, radio versus podcast. But if you're doing a podcast and it is educational, real, true content, it's got to be good content, and it is. Does it really matter how long it is? If you're really teaching somebody something, I'm going to dedicate whatever amount of time to really knowing it. So can you get away with that a little bit more?
I think, you know what? In theory, Brian, you're right. Okay. But in practicality, it's not. And I'm going to tell you why. Is because we're in this instant gratification society where we have to have it now. So anytime you say, hey, you know what, I'm going to teach you this, but it's going to take 3 hours. Nobody wants to bother, right? But, you know what, if you listen to this podcast for a half an hour, you're going to get the gist of what you need, or you're going to get the bulk of the information that you need in order to learn this. They'll listen to that. Okay. And this is the problem with our society. I was talking to somebody actually last night, the guest we had on the show. He's 41, I'm 55. So I grew up in the world of, the cool thing was the fax machine. And if you had a beeper, you were like, way ahead of everybody else, because we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have any of that stuff. And when we left the office at night, we dealt with whatever it was until, tomorrow. There wasn't, bings and bangs and booms all night long that, clients are trying to get a hold of you because they need you right now. Everybody understood that, it's after 5 o'clock. We'll deal with it tomorrow. Even the clients. Now it's not the case. It's that instant gratification. We got to have it now. And that's why so many, like we were talking about, and Kevin made a great point, is take the small chunks out that people are going to grasp onto, because they may not listen to the whole hour, but there may be 5 minutes or 10 minutes that really resonate with them.
And then perhaps you could link it over to the rest of it, is Hillary, with the blog that you do. right? You
Yep.
send out a newsletter, it's a paragraph, and then read more. Same kind of thing you could probably do with the videos.
Yeah.
I think
totally.
Gary Vaynerchuk is kind of the master at this. Vaynerchuk will have himself speaking, before a group, and he and his team will chop that up 8 ways to Sunday and share it in little bits, little points, and kind of repurpose all of that content. When we work with clients, we encourage them to think about a smaller piece because of the kind of fatigue that's out there, and often because if it's a new podcast, they just haven't built that audience. It's hard to get somebody willing to listen to the Joe Rogan length for the first podcast, right? So we say shoot for the 18 minutes, the TED Talk length, which you may go over. And when we have clients that have done something very long, maybe an interview went long, we'll cut it in half, part 1 and part 2, and break it up that way. So that the content's still there, but you can kind of consume it, when you're ready for it.
Just on that point, in terms of being fatigued, I was a big fan of Gary, and I haven't watched him in 6 months. I felt very fatigued from him. I was tired watching him because he's overwrought. And you know what I'm talking about? It's just so I don't listen or watch him at all now.
Yeah.
I feel maybe in the back of my head that I've heard it all from him. You know what I mean? So he's left nothing for the tease for me. We'll see what happens in the future. He might reinvent himself, or he might go away for 6 months.
I don't know, but he's probably going to unfriend you now that you made that statement.
That's okay. That's okay.
All right. So look, the purpose of doing this whole thing was to help people get a better understanding of doing a podcast or doing a radio show, something like that. Doing audio, video, it all is a difference. Everybody's got a chance to share their story. So now let's really truly look at it for like, okay, I own a pizza business. Let's use the pizza business as the example over here. What do I do? What do you think I should do? Should I start a podcast? Not. Maybe interview people, put it on the website, right? We could have had a website person. Well, Kevin, you're probably closest to the website kind of thing with the SEO. Well, I shouldn't say that. Number of folks with the SEO, right? Video is king. Video is everything. So what do you do? Do they pay for a service, go real professional, do a radio show, just do something, a Facebook Live and just save that video? Go ahead, Arthur. You're the first to raise your hand. It's like school. Raise your hand. I answer the question.
My quick thought on that is when you say something like, and you picked a really good example, right? A pizza place. On one hand, everyone could say, well, pizza, that's a commodity. But we live here on Long Island, and everyone here has a favorite pizza place. And it's probably different, right? We all have a favorite. So why would a pizza owner want to have a podcast? And what kind of podcast? It might be a video podcast where they show them making the pies, where they talk about the ingredients, where they show somebody taking that bite out of the first hot slice and talking about it. Maybe they've got some specialties and they're going to do something around that. Living the way we are right now, under the pandemic, maybe they want to introduce the fact that out the back door, and you didn't know they had a back door, they've put tents and tables, and now you can come back to your favorite pizza place, you can sit outside and order. Maybe they're going to shift. Here on Long Island, it's pretty normal to walk into a pizza place and say you'd like a couple of slices and walk out. But elsewhere in the country, you don't do that. You walk in and you buy a pie and walk out. So maybe this owner is going to take advantage of that. Come in, buy the pie, and take it out. And he wants to show you how he's building it. So I think there's something very visual and creative that could be done there. But I saw Hillary shaking her head. I don't think it has to be professional, right?
I agree with you. I totally agree with you, Arthur, that you could do a video. I'm not sure that it has to be a podcast. I think it could be a Facebook Live. It could be an Instagram Live. It could be a Reels. It could be a TikTok. It could be anything. But I don't think everybody should be doing a podcast. I think that the market is getting like a little bit oversaturated because everybody's doing it. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, okay, you know what? Let's hone in and figure out what exactly is going to get us the biggest bang for the buck. And if it's Instagram Live, stick with that.
You know, if it's TikTok, stick with that. Look at that guy who just made like a ton of money on TikTok, you know, drinking cranberry juice as he's riding by. Did you see that one? That was awesome.
It's great. Hillary and I are going to start a TikTok hype house.
I love TikTok. That's like one of my favorites.
It's, you know, but it's great. It's a really good short form video, what, under 60 seconds, something like that. That you can
It's
do.
perfect.
And it really is perfect. And to that point, if we broaden out our definition of a podcast, the only thing I would say, you know, from a business standpoint, I would say at least know your audience and know the kind of content that you're going to present and try and be somewhat consistent about it. So if you're going to be that pizza owner and you're going to talk about the pizza place and all, try and keep the focus on pizza. Don't start introducing your daughter who's a dancer. You know, let her get her own TikTok. You know, that your focus should stay on this.
You know, like with my podcast, I don't even say that I have HJMT public relations. I don't even get into that at all. It's Hillary Topper on air, and this podcast is for you. It's not for me, right? So there's, you know, you got to think about that. Like, does it make sense? How does it make sense? How much money do I have to put into this? Because it does cost.
Well, it costs everybody, not only the money, but the time. But, you know, like in my situation, my podcast that I do on the Business Power Hour, it's not about me. You know, so it's very, very rarely do we even mention what I do in my company and all that other stuff. Whereas my radio show, that's more of, you know, I'm an expert and I'm promoting myself as an expert. And we're talking about those different topics. So it really depends on what your show's about and what message you're really trying to get out. But I agree with Arthur. You have to be consistent in what you're doing. You can't, if you're going to do a podcast, you can't be 1 week, oh, I'm going to do it like this, and then the next week do something else, because you're going to lose your audience.
Right.
You know, audiences, people love consistency and people don't like change. So, you know, if you're consistent what you're doing, you build your audience up, and you'll have, you know, the Business Power Hour, we've been doing it for 2.5 years now, almost 3 years. And we have a very consistent audience. And we know, I can tell you by broadcasting and COVID changing, we went from doing it in a studio to now doing it via Zoom. And we have the same people on every week watching us and commenting and, you know, saying hi. And, you know, Brian's one of the people, he watches every week. And, you know, I know, even if I don't see Brian on screen, I can say, hey, Brian, how you doing? And all of a sudden his name pops up, you know, and he says, he puts a comment in. But I know these people are out there and they're actually watching. And that's what happens with consistency. If you're consistently delivering the same product all the time.
100%.
Because you got to remember your podcast, right, or your radio show is a product.
Right. So now that pizza place, staying with that as the example, it might be hard for the pizza place to show that they're an expert and put themselves in that kind of position, because unless there's some like unbelievable story that goes behind it, it's pizza made very, very, and it's got really a special made pizza. But for that pizza place to go on as the expert in not so in pizza, but that expert or the guest on one of the podcasts about local pizza place. Kevin, I'll bring this back to you. But, you know, the local pizza place in Port Jefferson. Oh, I've been interviewed on a show. That all of a sudden makes that pizza place stand out a little bit different. Oh, the pizza place that took extra steps on the outside tables or cleaning inside. Yeah, we clean now on a weekly basis. It's a great way to get that message out. So they could even go on a show, talk about COVID, what they're going through as a business owner. And as Hillary mentioned, right, is Hillary Topper on air? Oh, there's the company behind that. But even go on there about, as a small business owner, this is what we're doing to change with everything that's going on. So Kevin, this will be the last question. We'll go around, let everybody update as to what's kind of going on in their worlds and final comments. But Kevin, you got a podcast that is visual and for Port Jefferson. That's a lot of local companies that with that kind of message, that's the kind of guest that you're looking for.
Yeah, so first I was just going to remind us, are we doing any Q&As from people watching? Because I wanted you to be able to leave enough time for that. If they are, they would just ask a question on that.
This is what happens when you moderate a panel with a bunch of people that do podcasts and radio shows.
Yeah, probably.
I got you covered, man. I got you covered.
Let me ask you a question, answer your question directly. pizza places, no, I would not recommend, as Hillary said, that they have to do a podcast. I'm primarily a video company first, so I would do this amazing, very high definition 4K of cheese being made and people eating it. And that would communicate more than any podcast with just any old Joe, no disrespect, pizza owner could ever put across to people. That's the way I would do that. But that being said, if everybody still has a story, I would like to see them as a guest on the show. And so that host, being me in this case, would bring out the best in that and bring out something that maybe an event they had or something that just went a notch above just people going into a store and buying pizza. There's always something you can find to bring out a story. But certainly from a marketing standpoint, people that are in different creative businesses, professional businesses, lend itself better to podcasts. Because podcasts shouldn't be a once over. They should be continual. You guys have all talked about consistency, at least weekly. No easy task. That's why people start them and they don't keep up with them because it's work. But I would say at least weekly. And one of the things that I was doing is I was doing it 6 times. I would have guests in 6, 7, 8 times from 8 a.m. till 2 p.m. and then release it weekly. Nobody knew that, but that's what I had to do, right? To get the weekly show out. Otherwise, I'm meeting with people every week, which I can do, but that's one trick for us podcasters, to get it all done in one session, then release weekly.
Yeah, and that goes to, recording your podcast and then releasing it, or doing it live and then re-releasing it, where we do the shows live and then we release. Right. So, because it's a different element. People like that live thing. That's why we do it that way. We found that our guests like to be on live. They like to be able to say, I'm going to be on right now. And, and that's why we do it live. But going back to the pizza thing, I look at it from a different perspective and from the business perspective, because they could very well come up with a podcast if they're experts in developing a pizza business and expanding it and showing people how to do it. If they're willing to share their knowledge, then that possibly could be a podcast, right? Whereas, if it's just more, I want to show you how great of a pizza we make, then I agree with you. Then they should be a guest on a podcast.
Yeah. So it goes back to why. That is absolutely the biggest question in the world with so many different topics. Why in the world do you want to do it? How do you do it? There's a gazillion and one different ways to do these things. But why? What is it that you want to do? You're doing it purely for marketing? Do you want to get in front of a local area or a wider area? And that's a decision to be made there too, right? Do you go local or do you go big? If you have a pizza place in, locally, nobody is calling you from outside, a 20-mile radius. Maybe a little bit more than 20 miles, but nobody's calling you from another state to get a pizza. That's not necessarily happening. And I know these stories. Go ahead, Arthur.
No, I said that better be damn good pizza if you're getting from out of state to get it pulled in. But I think we're better off if we use a different business as a topic. For us, we're working with technology companies, managed services provider, and they're going to have things that they can talk about. Especially today, they can talk about Cisco WebEx and how that should be working for your school district and what you can do. They might be able to interview a district superintendent or somebody from BOCES to talk about that. They could even interview parents to say, what's the experience been like for your child? And they can give tips. They can talk about how to take away distraction, how to make it more focused. So any of those things make a really podcast topic. And it, depending on the company, if they're a company with a larger footprint. So we work with companies that have offices across the country. So that podcast can be distributed all over. So I think that talking about that, if you've got a good how-to and you can talk to that how-to all the time, that makes for a really good topic for your podcast. So the pizza place may or may not, it might be a one-off. And I think, as Hillary said, it might be those shorter videos in a different venue. But you might be able to do something more, more what we'd consider a traditional podcast if you've got something that, that can have a little bit more shelf life.
Right. And that's the magical thing too. A pizza place, they use that because it's a local thing. It still can be done, podcast or radio show, whatever, because it's local. If you have an online business where geography doesn't matter, so we'll go back to your original comments on that. Then you know what? something that's a podcast, something that's recorded, something that can be listened to at any time, wherever, whenever, certainly makes a lot more sense. All right, we've got 5 minutes to go. And why don't we go around the room? Hey, Hillary, what's new in your world? You got the book going on, you got the blogs, you got new projects all the time. Tell us what's going on.
So I do have the book, and as I put in the chat, if anybody wants a copy of it, I'm going to be giving it away for free. So just shoot me an email at hillary@hjmt.com, and I will send you a copy of my book. It's about 300 pages, and it was a monster to write. Besides that, I'm teaching at Hofstra. I teach 2 classes there, and the PR business is ridiculously busy right now, I guess because everybody's home and looking for business. So we're doing, it's crazy. The podcast business, if anybody is interested in being on the show, just shoot us an email. You can shoot it to Lisa Gordon. It's lisa@hjmt.com. Love to have you. We basically get like our guests though nationally, like they come to us, the PR firms all around the country pitch us to have their people on our show. So it just makes it a lot easier for us to find guests. But otherwise, everything's great. And thank you very much, Brian, for having me on the panel today.
Absolutely my pleasure. And you can measure success with shares on that one. It pays to get guests on that. It can share your shows if you're that. And if you are a guest, by all means, share what you did. Share what you did. You should be proud of what you did. Post it on your websites and everything like that. Arthur, you've got, you've continued to move forward with different things, such as the podcast service.
Right, the podcast service is called Brand Storycasting. You can find it at brandstorycasting.com. I've put that down in the chat. And if you want to try and start your own podcast, we encourage you to go there. And I've created a coupon code today that you can use through the end of the year. It's HIA-LI 2020, and get 10% off on any of the podcast packages.
Very good. This is why I like it. That was a hashtag I used for this thing too. Kind of think alike. I know that's scary, Darren, isn't it? Whatever. He's the analytical mind of the whole thing. I'm the, oh, let's go and do it, right? So what about you there, Sarah? What do you got new in your world? You got a couple of things coming up too?
Are you talking about me or are you talking about Kevin?
You. It's all about you.
It's always all about me, right?
Never raises his hand, but it's his
that's the wrong partner on my show. It's always all about my partner, right? So we got the Business Power Hour every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Catch us on Facebook. Go to our Facebook page, the Business Power Hour with Darren and the Music Man. If you want more information, if you want to be a guest, reach out to us from there. We're always looking for guests. We're doing everything virtually now, so you could be in another country and be on our show. Also on Long Island News Radio every Monday afternoon at 3 p.m. Now you can listen to it across the country also, because you can get it on iHeartRadio and radio.net live, and then it's rebroadcasted through all the different podcast channels as well as Audible. You mentioned Audible before, but you can get it through Audible also. That's the Darren Sayafi Show. Okay. And then what I do for an actual living, CBS consulting. Look, we're accountants and business advisors that are different. You see profit first behind me and stuff. And when we look at a P&L, we don't look at it sales minus expenses equal your profit. We look at it sales minus your profit equal your expenses. So Perfect. It's a different thing. So you want to put more money in your pocket, contact us.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Kevin, you got the last, less than a minute, my friend.
All right, I'll do it.
You got a countdown clock.
Absolutely. I just put it in the text box there. I also host a show called Long Island Talks, distributed on longisland.com. The benefit there is the distribution, right? You can say what you want in this world, but if you don't have anybody watching, it doesn't matter. So we enjoy that partnership. I'm getting ready to be part of the production team for tonight's Newsday Live, Blue Oyster Cult. Tune into that. That's going to be amazing. And we just opened up a brand new studio. Please, anybody that wants to stop by, just text me. My number's there, and come take a look at what we're doing. Thanks a lot for the opportunity today.
Appreciate that. Brian Cohen. So we have a booth here today at the show. If you want to scoot over to that, we'll continue on talking about different things. And that is communication skills. That is it. It's the Toastmasters booth. On a more permanent basis, LI speakers, find me over there with Arthur, doing all kinds of different things. Just got to keep moving forward, folks. It's all about that. And Ariana, again, thank you so much. The HIA going virtual, it's been an exciting venture. and a lot that we gain from it. And certainly, it's a wider.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. And I have also put in the chat, you can click right over there and bring you right to the virtual exhibit hall if you haven't checked it out yet. So thank you for everyone. Thank you to our panelists and have a great day.
So long. Good seeing everyone. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day, everybody.
Be well.
Take care.